First item on the docket this week is Spider-Man's PC port. Spider-Man Miles Morales and Spider-Man PC, releasing in August of this year. There was a trailer dropped, as well as a number of specifications for different hardware, depending upon your settings. This is a port by Nixies, and the first person I'll go to on this is you, Sam, here, because you tend to cover PC ports for Ars Technica, and what's your response?
I gotta say, as long and as deeply as I have gone into both Spider-Man games on PlayStation consoles, the sight in this trailer of the ultra wide ratios really took my breath away. And this is the thing about this game. Spider-Man, as made by Insomniac, is one of these games that everyone loves and has wanted to play. One of these insane system sellers. And the idea of just perching up on a Manhattan skyline and looking out was already fantastic. But once you add that ultra wide kind of thing, the way they drop that in, you could just almost see everybody working on that trailer and working on the game sort of salivating to finally let that out. But when you look at what's coming, it's so exciting as a fan of console ports to PC to see Nixus really seem to be unleashed. We've got and I can't even get through all of the different things that this has shown beyond. I'm excited to see DLSS and DLAA from NVIDIA both being in there natively. Also all of the different little touches. There's a shadow complete top to bottom retouch that's happening here that looks really good. It's only a minute of footage that looks familiar, but it just and ray tracing, obviously, which is because we're going to finally be able to see what happens without PlayStation 5 as that bottleneck. Like, what's that resolution going to be like? How many multiple reflections are we going to get? Because this is a game that's rich with glass everywhere and puddles. Like, remember Puddlegate? Like it was so long ago, and now here we are with something that's like, all right, everything, uncork the complete potential, because Sony is clearly at this point shrugging its shoulders to some extent to say, yeah, the game's been out on console for long enough, now we can crack it wide open with Nixus.
Yeah, that's a good point, and this is obviously something I'm going to be covering on the channel, probably doing 2 videos, maybe an interview, we'll see. But Adam, what is your kind of reaction here to the specs that they put out? I don't know if you've taken a look at them, pointing out something like, it's like the GTX 1060 is good enough for about 1080p and 60 FPS on what looks to be like medium settings, I believe it was. It actually seems like a really reasonable port, given how the fact this was an engine that was for so long just on PlayStation consoles. So I don't know, what's your reaction here?
Yeah, obviously you're not going to be getting a lot of the higher end features that they're advertising in the trailer with that, but I think when you consider what you're running at for some of for like the 60 FPS mode on launch of Spider-Man before they added the 60 FPS RT mode, I think you're going to get a pretty reasonable experience. It's not going to look like the trailer, and I think that's going to... I've seen a lot of discourse already of people, being the PC versus console stuff, and like the PC experience you're going to get on a 1060 is not going to be that trailer, but it's still going to be really nice. And frankly, the game's art direction in the way that it's just so clean and clear, I think no matter how... obviously there's a limit, but like the more you pare down the graphics, you're still going to get a very beautiful experience. It's simple enough without, it doesn't have the Call of Duty effect of there's dust and particles and explosions constantly. Like, it's just a nice, clean city. And a lot of even the Spider-Man suit textures are simple enough that I think when you scale them down, you're still getting a wonderful looking game. So I think most people are going to be happy with it if they're expecting to run modern AAA launches today anyway. So,
well, my feeling is when you come from the base Jaguar architecture of the last console generation, you have so much room to go up, which means so many older systems should conceivably be able to compete with those ancient Jaguar cores and be able to at least, goodness, you could take hopefully a potato PC and get this to 30 frames a second and hand this to a kid who loves Spider-Man. And that's been, I can't tell you how many times non-gamer friends of mine just want to get Spider-Man in front of their kids and don't give a crap about any of the other technical stuff. So I would like to see that kind of scalability happen, but then that's a question of, well, as a closed architecture, at least PlayStation 4 could do all of the streaming wizardry needed to keep the entirety of Manhattan moving when you're taking Spider-Man from one end of the city to the other. I think that's going to be totally doable because they were able to get it done on PlayStation 4, but that's the test I want to see, is if you take an old gaming laptop, set it to 30 frames a second, and just start web swinging from one end of the city to the other on weak hardware, is it going to be fine? I think that's going to be, to me, as interesting as how hard you can push, say, a 3090.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because, I mean, at the beginning of that console generation, the last generation of consoles, we were pitting at DF before I started working here, things like dual-core PCs with 7050 Ti's against the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and it was superior at that point in time due to the fact that developers were still struggling with getting things done properly and fast on those Jaguar CPU cores. They were not as multi-threaded, the games back then. Definitely were not. But things have obviously changed over time, and Insomniac are definitely one of the studios that have always pushed the PlayStation 4, probably the best looking PlayStation 4 games, in my opinion, always. And, you know, seeing how we can scale that back on PC, that's one thing I'm really interested in. I'm interested in seeing how it runs on Steam Deck. Maybe that's an Oliver video. I don't know. Also, so my boy Nixies, you know, they do incredible work. I've always been a fan of their PC ports, Deus Ex and all the Tomb Raider stuff. But here they are definitely going above and beyond DLSS, DLAA, and I'm going to check out, probably in a video, checking out how the ray tracing compares to what we had on console optimized settings. And then I think there actually might be enough room in there for a whole entire different video, just covering the difference between DLSS and maybe the custom solution that Insomniac uses on console. Because that's one of the things, like, we've always known the quality there, but we haven't ever been able to compare it to a PC solution. So that's all. I think that's really all really have to say about Spider-Man on PC.
The thing that I have a question on, though, is this is yet another example of NVIDIA shoving its way in and saying, our proprietary tech. When you look at, I don't know, PlayStation's relationship with AMD, is that just a matter of Nixus running the show and saying this is how it's going to go? Is the PC side of Sony has that sort of signature on a contract and says we're going to do it that way? That stuff is so curious to me, because you'd think AMD would love to get its way in. I'm sure, I have to imagine someone at AMD is like, hey, why didn't we get that deal done? That's the backroom stuff I find fascinating here.
I get the feeling it's due to the emphasis on the ray tracing. I think that's the big thing, because God of War had FSR, didn't it?
Yeah, the FSR 1.0 and then added 2.0 later on, but also DLSS. So there's, like, that's a really good question, but I think the emphasis on ray tracing here, and that was what it was known for on console. And on PC side, honestly, when people think ray tracing, they usually think of NVIDIA products. So maybe that's the connection there, but, you know,
we've got Zen 2 architecture doing the ray tracing on the PlayStation 5 port. So
yeah.
That's more of an open hypothetical question than really anything. However, let's also conclude with we're finally going to get some DualSense web slinging on this version, and I don't know how much more that's going to be enhanced. I just remember when I haven't been back to PlayStation 5 Spider-Man for a minute, so I don't recall how much of the impulse trigger and rumbling stuff was in that DualSense build, but any of that stuff is really good. I mean, I just tested Stray on PC with the DualSense, and it's nice to have the little cat nuzzles buzzing that way.
Yeah, that'd be cool. But yes, more on that when it comes out next month.